Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 74. Brothers. You shouldn't have left, was what the first message from Loki said. Thor did not know how to reply to it, and it just made him frustrated. At the same time, it also made something warm up in his chest because Loki did not want him to leave Stark's house despite what happened with Hatchet. He did his best to ignore that because he shouldn't allow his sentiments to influence him so much. A part of him also knew that he would cave, at least a little, because he had hope again, and that stubbornly clung to his heart, indelible and not to be silenced again. One voice was still whispering in his mind that he should not hope and should not trust, for he could be betrayed again, just like before. But he couldn't listen to that one voice. His mother was right. If he did not hope, no one else would. If he gave up, Loki would truly be lost to him. You actually have a little stand for Mjolnir. Typical, was what the second message said. Its true meaning was clear enough, so Thor excused himself and got up to his floor to see his brother. Thor was not surprised to see him standing right next to Mjolnir when he walked into the room. He was wearing Midgardian clothes, and he was running one finger idly down the handle.
Your nails are black,
Thor pointed it out for the lack of a better thing to say. Loki huffed. Hatchet, don't ask.
Was it going to?
Thor said. He walked further into the room until he was standing on the other side of the little stand his hammer rested on. Loki dropped his hand from it and crossed his arms over his chest. You shouldn't have come here,
Loki said. I don't see why not, Thor told him. Didn't Stark tell you that I will be back in a few days?
He told me.
Why are you here then?
Because you always do this, Loki said, a bit of irritation slipping into his tone.
This?
Yes, this. Running to your friends so they can fill your head with what they think instead of trying to figure out what you think.
As I recall, I used to run to you most of the time.
Thor pointed it out.
To let you fill my head.
Loki bristled at that, scowling at Thor. You only ever came to me once you were in trouble.
That is not true. You got me in plenty of trouble yourself as well,
Thor argued.
And it's not like you never came to me when you were in trouble.
He thought about that for a moment.
At least you used to.
Obviously, I stopped once you made it clear that you cared not for my troubles, Loki told him.
I have never said such a thing,
Thor said right away. Not in so many words.
Then you have misunderstood me, for I would have never turned you away.
No, but I would have to bear being ridiculed and mocked by your friends. Have I gone to you? And you would have just laughed along with them.
Loki,
don't even try to deny this one, Loki said firmly.
We have made jest all the time. It was not just you. We have laughed at Volstag's appetite or Fondral's frivolous ways. You have too.
You laughed at the things they did, and not at what and who they are, Loki snapped. There's a difference. Thor fell silent at Loki's sudden anger, the way the tension so easily seeped into his muscles. But before he could open his mouth to say, he did not even know what he intended to say because Loki sighed and shook his head. I'm not here to talk about that, he said. It doesn't matter.
It does if it upsets you so,
Thor said. Thor rarely had seen Loki so free with his emotions, and it never used to seem so raw and scorching, everything shimmering so very close to the surface. There was always something proper and subdued about his brother, just like their mother in a way, never losing his composure. It made everything he said and did when Thor returned to Asgard that day all the more terrifying, the way he screamed and cried and shouted like he was a different man altogether. Thor could, of course, recall days when his brother laughed freely, when he enjoyed the things they got up to or gotten drunk along with him. But those days, sadly, had been a very long time ago. They were overshadowed by everything that happened in recent years. He felt a stab of guilt again, and like so many times before, a voice in his head whispered that he should have noticed. There were signs long before the day of his coronation. There were signs that something was not right. Tony Stark was right. None of them noticed. It would have been easy to say that Loki was just too good at fooling everyone, but Thor did not feel like it was an excuse. They should have noticed. He should have noticed. I can see you burying yourself under your thoughts. Loki spoke again.
I should have...
Spare me, Loki interrupted. You are not my keeper.
If you truly believed that, you wouldn't be so angry with me.
Thor sighed. Wallowing in guilt over and over again will help us nowhere, Loki said firmly. Thor looked at his brother for quite a long moment, in fact, and was astonished again by how much better he looked than the way Thor remembered him.
Being honest, speaking truths and answering no matter the question. Wouldn't that help us?
It was a lot to ask for and not easy to give. Not just for Loki, but Thor himself. He considered himself an honest man, but he knew himself well enough. He tended to stay silent on matters close to his heart, not wanting others to worry, not wanting others to see him in pain or in a moment of weakness. Steve told him it did not matter that he was allowed to have doubts or to be weak. If he just stood up again and again, if he never stayed down, all would be well. Thor was trying to follow those wise words, but some habits were hard to break. It couldn't hurt, Loki said after a moment.
Can I ask you something then?
Thor started because there was one question burning in his mind more than anything else, and he needed to hear some answers. Maybe knowing wouldn't make things better, maybe it would make it even worse, but at least he would know. Go ahead, Loki said quietly.
Tell me honestly why you ruined my coronation,
Thor asked him. He heard plenty of things from his friends, from his father and mother even, about what Loki's reasons could have been. But he needed to hear it from Loki himself. Still bothered by that? Loki asked in return.
I need to know, Loki.
He answered honestly. Loki turned and looked at him, kept his gaze on him for a long moment, then sighed and turned to look out on the window again. Very well, he said, and a painful weight already lifted from Thor's heart just hearing that. Believe it or not, it wasn't out of envy, Loki started, but I'm sure many told you it was so. Thor didn't deny that. I did it because you were not ready, Loki said. But none of you would have listened to me when I voiced my concerns. Odin would not speak with me on the matter because it was not my place to question the decision he had made. He told me once, not long after you were named the heir, that the throne was not something I could win with an argument.
When was that?
Thor asked. When I asked him what the qualities were that made him choose you. I was not angry, you see. I knew it wouldn't be me for quite some time. And I believed you would become a fine king one day. But I had to ask what it was.
And what did he say?
Nothing much, Loki shrugged. That he was fortunate that he had two such fine sons, and that I should go back to celebrate. I answered the question myself then. It's not like it was hard to see that what made you great were the things that I so sorely lacked. This he did not say with anger. He said it like it was a long-accepted fact he couldn't even get angry about anymore. So I couldn't go to Odin, and you...
I would have been angry, insulted,
Thor said quietly when Loki trailed off. He could look back at the man he used to be and picture it so vividly, how he would have reacted had his brother spoken to him about doubting him. He would have felt betrayed, and he would have been angry because Loki was always clever, and his concerns would have made Thor doubt himself even more. Loki's reassurances were one of the few things that helped him keep a straight back and a big smile as the day of the coronation approached. And everyone else already believed me to be jealous of you taking the throne, Loki continued.
Surely, Mother...
Thor tried. The Queen said she was not worried, Loki said, because you would have me on your side so I could compensate for all your shortcomings.
She truly said that?
Thor asked. It became clear to me that I had been prepared for the role of an advisor, that the reason why I was raised as a king was to know enough to stand behind you when you became the ruler of Asgard. Well, at least that is what I thought at the time. I did not know about my true heritage then. That is how Thor imagined it whenever he pictured himself as king. He always had Loki by his side. It was an idyllic picture he was very fond of. Now that he thought back on it, his mother told him not once, while they were growing up, that there was no shame in asking for his brother's help and support, for Loki would always stand by his side.
You despised the thought of helping me rule Asgard so much?
He asked. Loki groaned in frustration and hit the glass of the window once, not hard enough to break it. Like you ever listened to me outright, he said. I had to weave words, put ideas in your head, and convince you it was something you wanted all along." His voice was rising in volume, and so did the anger in his tone with it. "That alone would have been insulting," he continued, gritting his teeth and resolutely staring out the window, not looking at Thor. "But that they thought that it was all I was good for? To be your keeper," he spat. "To clean up your messes and support you from the shadows, while you enjoyed the admiration of the people." He took in a large breath, visibly trying to rein in his anger. "And I would have done it," he said a tad quieter. "If only there would have been even a sliver of respect for me, I would have gladly done it. But there was none. Not from you, and certainly not from any other Aesir. You all thought so little of me, while you were praised for everything you did. One chance. That was what I told myself, that I only need one chance to prove that you were not ready, and that I was capable of more than what they thought of me. Then they would listen to me instead of thinking me a jealous child." Tony Stark's words were ringing in Thor's ears. Others need more, need different things. Thor always had that perfect picture in his mind. He never really thought it would not be so perfect for Loki. He thought his brother was content. Assumptions. Again. It was truly his greatest flaw, was it not? He almost opened his mouth to tell Loki that he should have spoken to him honestly, but he realized how foolish it would have been to say that. Suddenly it felt like he and Loki had lived like two paintings on a wall, showing the same picture to one another constantly, looking fine on the surface, but flat and empty beneath it. When did they stop being brothers? Because it was not the day of his coronation. It happened long before that.
"Did you have any questions to me?" Thor asked. "Something you need to know. I swear to be honest."
"I do not know," Loki said. Thor nodded, and they stayed silent for a while. Thor had the urge to do something, to move things forward, but he did not know what to say. At least he could say that the quiet was peaceful. To think that he was losing hope of even this being possible again. The hope that was clinging to his heart was not going anywhere now.
"I do not know you,"
Thor said then. Loki turned to look at him.
"I mean, I know some of you, but not all that there is. I know a lot less than I thought."
"I've changed," Loki said.
"So have I,"
Thor said, and while ugly words and painful memories came to mind with those words, it was good to say them. "I've noticed." There was a tiny smile in the corner of Loki's mouth, and it felt like a victory, like something was mending, healing. Thor resisted the urge to reach out to put his hand on Loki's neck the way he always did. He couldn't do that yet. Loki had no questions, or so he said, but Thor suspected that it was more a case of too many questions. Maybe he was afraid of the answers Thor would give. Maybe he didn't believe the answers could change anything. Thor was never clumsy with words, and yet the desire to say everything right was almost numbing. If Loki wouldn't ask, Thor had to answer without questions.
"It is true that I rarely listened to you outright,"
he said. It was a good place to start as any.
"But it wasn't because I did not value your words."
Loki turned to look at him, leaning to the glass.
"I may not have heard that much gossip on Asgard, but I was still aware of the waggling tongues speaking of me,"
Thor continued. He didn't think he ever said any of this out loud. Maybe it was time.
"That I was a great warrior, a strong man, and a good leader on the battlefield, but also that I was lucky that I had a smart brother because I was no wise and cunning Odin."
Loki was frowning a little, but he did not interrupt. Let Thor continue in his own time. He did need a moment to think about how to put his words.
"I wanted to prove that I could handle myself alone,"
Thor said finally.
"Prove that I was not such a simpleton, that I could very well make decisions without my brother's advices. I know this may sound arrogant to you or foolish, but it is the truth."
"I didn't think you were aware of such things," Loki said. "You've never—"
"Shown. I know that,"
Thor said. "And not many spoke of you that way," Loki added.
"There were plenty," Thor said. "I know this may not be what you want to hear, but I still must tell you. I knowingly dismissed you in front of others many times. I wasn't just stubborn."
Loki's jaw tightened a little at that, but he did not say anything. Thor hurried to continue.
But I never thought you to be beneath me. That is not why I have done it. He said, I never once thought that your advice was to be taken lightly. Never thought I was better than you.
Never once did he think that something like this needed to be said out loud. It was something so very obvious for him. But it was evidently not obvious for Loki, not at all.
I am truly sorry for it, he said then, because I was childish and stubborn and not willing to admit my weaknesses, and I was desperate to hide the fact that I always needed you to help me. I'm sorry that I believed that listening to you made me look weak.
Loki was pulling at the edge of his shirt, a nervous habit Thor had not seen him do in a long while. He always clasped his hands together in front of him to hide it. You were expected to be able to stand on your own feet, he said after a moment.
Expected,
Thor repeated.
I despise that word.
Oh, so do I, Loki agreed. The way he stood there quietly listening, Thor felt like he wouldn't get many more opportunities like this, if any at all. Strike while the iron is hot, as they said. He needed to speak now, when he knew he was being heard. He might not get another chance. So he stepped around Mjolnir's stand, the only barrier between them to be closer to Loki. His brother did not step away when Thor leaned to the glass next to him, but he only looked at him from the corner of his eye. That was fine. His throat felt dry and his eyes stung, but he had to get these words out.
I'm sorry I was not a better brother,
he said. Loki jerked a little and he looked like he wanted to speak, so Thor did not resist any longer and reached out to put his hand on his neck to capture his attention.
Let me speak,
he asked. He would plead if he had to. It did not matter. Loki looked at him with slightly widened eyes, his body tense like he wanted to run.
I'm sorry that I was not a better brother, he repeated. Had I been a good brother, then you would have been able to talk to me honestly.
He swallowed, but continued.
You would have been able to tell me that I was not ready. And if I would have been a better man, then I would have admitted that you were right.
I was not always right, Loki said, his voice quiet. He sounded so young again, it nearly broke Thor's heart.
I know.
He nodded, smiled even.
But what sort of a brother was I?
He asked, angry at himself again.
That my own sibling did not dare to speak the truth because I would have been too angry in my arrogance to listen to wise words. I know my faults, Loki,
he said then.
I learn more and more about them every day. So I am sorry that I forced you to scheme and plot because I would not listen to reason.
Loki just looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for what Thor did not know. To be fair, he said after a moment, I did trick you quite many times with my seemingly wise words. Thor laughed, the sound torn out of him unexpectedly, and he knew that if he did not laugh, he would cry.
That you did,
he agreed.
It never bothered me.
Loki laughed this time, in a quieter tone, but it sounded just as hard and broken as Thor felt his own laugh to be. That is not how I remember it, Loki said. I ran and hid from you plenty of times.
But I always laughed about it the day after,
Thor said, sobering.
And I always believed you the next time you spoke to me, no matter how many times I was fooled.
Loki just stared at him at that, his eyes too bright. Thor gripped at Loki's neck tightly one last time before letting go, but he did not step away. It was his turn to look out of the window for a moment.
What now, Loki?
He asked. Will you let me settle my debt with Jotnar? Loki asked.
Thor sighed. If that is what you truly want. But I worry about your fate in their hands.
Thor said.
You really think they would judge you more fairly than father?
Thor watched how Loki's face hardened at the mention of him. I was always but a tool to be used. I don't see how he would be sentimental, Loki said.
That is not true, Loki,
Thor said.
You cannot believe that.
I think Odin first intended me as a puppet king, Loki said. A Jotun prince raised in Asgard, loyal to the realm and its future king, you. Once Laufey was out of the way, Jotunheim would have been easy to rule like that.
He would have told you about your true heritage then.
Thor agreed.
Maybe he changed his mind,
Loki said simply.
Maybe he decided that I should rather just remain your advisor. Maybe he learned from his mistake with Frey, who was supposed to be just a puppet in his hand, but who instead solidified his power over time and became a true king to be reckoned with. Maybe he realized I was not that easy to control.
You said you were an abandoned child,
Thor said. He found me in a sacred temple of the Jotnar, not under some rock, Loki said. And he said it himself. He intended to unite the kingdoms one day through me. What does that sound like to you?
But he came to love you, Loki,
Thor said.
Your son.
You should never make the mistake of forgetting that Odin is king first and father second. His love, if it ever existed at all, would not have stopped him from going through with his plans.
I do not think I can convince you differently,
Thor said.
Not now, anyway.
You do not know Odin's mind, so you cannot speak of his intentions.
No,
Thor had to admit.
I cannot.
Loki nodded jerkily, seemingly surprised that Thor stopped arguing.
But I can speak for myself,
Thor said.
And I can tell you for certain that I would not have let him go through with it. I would not have let him separate us like that.
Loki looked at him again. His expression was hard to read. Consideration, maybe.
Are you so certain of that? He asked.
Of course,
Thor said right away.
You are a changed man now, but back then if Odin had told you one day that whom you had believed to be a brother was in fact a frost giant, the son of Laufey, maybe soon to be king of Jotunheim? To be honest, Thor, you would have been eager for me to be gone from your sight, if I would have left Asgard alive, that is.
Anger spiked within Thor the second those words left Loki's mouth. He moved instead of speaking, closed the distance between them, but not to harm him, even if he was tempted to knock him hard on the head until he got such stupid things out of his mind. Loki stiffened when Thor's arms locked around him and he was pulled impassively close. He could probably get away from the tight embrace, but he did not move.
no,
Thor said sternly.
Thor,
no,
he repeated, pulling him even closer, if that was even possible.
never say such a thing.
His voice was hard, but it wavered from all the emotions he could not hide.
He was furious that Loki would ever think such a thing. It hurt as well, because this was just another way he failed as a brother, if Loki doubted his love for him so much. Did he truly think that he lost them all when he learned the truth? Thor,
Loki tried to speak again, but no, not now.
You're my brother, he said fiercely. I will not call you so if you do not want me to, but you will always be my brother. I could never see you as anything else, not ever.
Loki was silent and still rigid in his arms, but Thor went on.
I have loved you for as long as I can remember, and I will not stop until my heart gives out, my last breath escapes me, and I ride up to Valhalla. And you cannot say that I do not, you're not allowed. I will not stand for it. It is my heart. I decide who has a place in it, no one else.
Loki was incredibly still for a very long moment. Then his body relaxed, the fight going out of him.
I was not a good brother,
he said in a very small voice, and Thor just had to keep him close, had to keep his arm around him for as long as he could.
You were good enough for me,
he said, not even caring about the tears gathering in his eyes.
You still are.
That's when he felt Loki's weight. His brother leaning forward, allowing himself to be held. His head dropped to Thor's shoulder, and a moment later his arms came up as well, holding on tightly. How long has it been since he did this? By the norms, he couldn't even remember. It didn't matter, only the future ahead of them. They were so broken, so not right still, but hope. He had such hope again, and he didn't even try to chase it away or shut it down. He could hold on to it now, grab it tight with strong arms and an open heart. Then he heard a whisper, all too quiet, but still meant to be heard.
I'm sorry.
It will be well, Loki,
he promised. Whether he wanted to reassure Loki or himself, he didn't know. He didn't care.
We will make it right.
When Loki squeezed him just a little tighter at those words, the weight of a whole world lifted from his shoulders. He would not let go again. He would hold on to this no matter what came. He could not lose this again. They could make it right. They would. Together.